this is a sign that I want people to know that you're mine and I'm yours. I mean, that's not King James Version, but basically that's what he's saying. I want people to, this is going to be a sign to know that I'm your God and you're my people. But you see what happened is when Israel was in bondage in Egypt for 400 years, and then they get set free from Egypt, and they're in the wilderness for 40, that whole generation that was in Egypt had to die off before they could go into the promised land. Remember that? Because of the disobedience when they got to the line and the spies went in. Everybody that come out of Egypt had to die off before they could enter into the promise. And all the ones that was born in the wilderness that actually got to go in did not take part in this covenant. And so God tells Joshua that they need to go back and fix this. And all that is in chapter 5. And then something happens after this. And I know I've read this scripture. Like, Joshua's one of my favorite books. I know I've read this a million times. And I've never really seen this before. And it's in verse 9. And this is right after that they get done circumcising all the men. And they take time to heal. And then God comes and says something to Joshua. But if you want to put that up in verse 9 on chapter 5 of Joshua. It says, "Then the Lord said to Joshua, 'This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. Therefore the name of the place is called Gilgal to this day.'" And man, I read this and it just floored me over the weekend. I never remembered seeing this quite like this before, that they've been out of Egypt for over 40 years. They had left Egypt behind them 40 years ago. And yet God says, "This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from off of you." Come on, I just feel like I just got to get real this morning. But anybody ever felt like you've been in bondage before? Whether that be an addiction, or whether that be just fear, or whether it be a past lifestyle, and you feel like you've just been in bondage, and the thing happens, and you get set free from that, but for some reason you still carry a weight of that bondage. For 40 years, Israel is wandering through a wilderness, carrying a weight of bondage of Egypt still on their life. And it wasn't until... I won't get ahead of myself. This word "rolled away" in the Hebrew, I love going and looking up original text. And this word "rolled away" is the Hebrew word galal. And it means to roll down, to roll away, or to remove. Now, Hebrew language is a language that is a lot of like picture words. Like their words actually paint a picture. And this is the research I did, and this is what it said. The picture is of a camel burdened with a heavy load. When the load is to be removed, the camel kneels down, tilts far to one side, and the load rolls off. So when God says that He has rolled away the reproach, it's literally a picture of a weight that has been carried, that finally when the camel lays over on his side, the weight would roll off. And you know, I began to try to picture this in my mind. And how many of you know that a camel, that they're ugly, big, tall creatures, but when they lay down, if they roll over and weight gets to moving, it's going to be hard for them to hold some weight back, and then we'll let some weight go. But how many times do I look at my life and I'm like, okay, I have a moment to where God is wanting to roll back the reproach of Egypt off of my life. And He's wanting to roll some weight off that I'm still carrying from past bondages that He never meant for me to carry in the first place. And He's saying, all I want to do is roll this off of you. And I say, okay, God, you can roll this, but I'm going to hang on to it just a little bit more. And the thing about it is, I think so many times we do it unintentionally. Or maybe without even thinking about it. Maybe in our mind, we want nothing more than just to get rid of this weight. But in our flesh, we don't know how to walk without it. in my prayer life, I'm like, God, I want this gone. God, I want this gone. God, I want this weight taken care of. But yet I have become so accustomed to the weight that I'm carrying, and that becomes my new norm, that now I don't know how to move without it. Israel went back, and what did they do? What did they do to get God to say, this day I have rolled away the weight of Egypt? They went back and reestablished their original covenant. They went back and they said, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to reestablish the original covenant that God made with our father Abraham. Why? Was it about the cutting? Well, that's as far as I'll go into that. No, it had nothing to do. It was all about them getting back to the place to where they was willing to say, I'm going to set a sign up that says, you're my God and I'm your people. The moment that Israel said, I'm going to reestablish this covenant, that moment God said, this day I'm going to roll away the reproach of Egypt off of you. And you know what I believe? And to me, this just kind of confirms something that I've believed for a while, because I've often asked, okay, God is all-powerful, God is all-knowing, God controls everything, He's sovereign. I believe that with everything in me. So, why didn't God just give Israel Egypt? I've asked that question many times. Why didn't God just give Israel Egypt? It was already there. It was already built up. They even said in the wilderness they had melons and stuff and food to spare. Why didn't they just give them Egypt? Why did they have to wander through a wilderness for 40 years? Why? What was the point of all that? And I believe it was God saying, listen, you're not legally allowed to step into the promise that I have for you until you no longer look like Egypt. Come on, I don't know about you, but yes, they was God's people, but you be in Egypt in bondage for 400 years, you're going to start looking like them. You're going to start acting like them. Your speech is going to start resembling them. Your belief is going to start resembling their belief. And God's saying, listen, I've got something set aside for you, and I've got something in the plan for you, and I've got better for you, but you can't enter into that as long as you're still looking like Egypt. So I believe firmly that this moment when God said you need to go back and reestablish the covenant that I originally made with Abraham, if they would have failed to do that, I don't think they'd have ever entered into Canaan. The whole time that Israel's walking through the wilderness, they're still carrying a weight from Egypt. Then they go and reestablish covenant. God says, this day I have rolled away the reproach from Egypt from you. Therefore the name of the place is called Gilgal. The name Gilgal means rolling. Now this is verse 10. Now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. So, reestablishment of covenant led to reproach being rolled off, right? So, reproach being rolled off led to the ceasing of the manna. Which means that now they're partaking of the fruit of the promise. Everybody wait? Y'all with me? So they reestablished covenant. By reestablishing their covenant with God, that rolls off the weight that they had been carrying from bondage for all those years. Once that weight is taken off, God's saying, now you can start partaking of the promise that I had spoken over you while you was still in Egypt. What did they? We'll make it real simple. What did they eat the whole time they was in the wilderness? Manna and quail. The whole time, like that's all they eat for 40 years. I started trying to do this health food stuff, and I ate tuna for like 3 weeks, and I can't stand the smell of tuna now. Like, I don't know how Billy does it. Like, he's a tuna trooper. But, like, he'll open up tuna on lunch, and, like, it'll clear out the room almost. It's just, for 40 years, they ate manna. And now at the reestablishment of covenant and at the weight being rolled off, now they're legally allowed to start partaking of the promise because God spoke over them while they was in Egypt that I'm taking you to a land flowing with milk and honey. Now in that 40 years, I wonder how many times the children of Israel said, this man is not milk and it's not honey. This doesn't look like what you promised me. Anybody else ever prayed anything like that? Come on, this is not what I had pictured in my, because everybody knows them situations when you get like this picture in your mind of what it's going to turn out like, and then when it turns out like, it's nothing like what you had pictured in your mind. And I'm sure Israel's like, listen, we thought we was leaving Egypt. We was going to step right into Canaan. The people that was there was just going to give us their houses, and they was going to leave, and we was going to be able to just get fat off the land. But there was 40 years of nothing but manna. And at the moment that the weight of Israel, at the moment that Egypt was finally taken off of Israel, Israel began to partake of the fruit of the promise, and the manna ceased. Which brought up my next question. Why did the manna have to cease? I mean, it says it was like a sweet wafer, right? And then you got the fruit of the land. So, I mean, you could have just kept the manna and made like a manna banana pudding. I was just making sure y'all's awake. Why did the manna have to cease? Listen, I was reading this and I kept going back to Victoria's illustration that she did up here. I don't remember if that was last Sunday or 2 Sundays ago about the shoes. Y'all remember that? Whenever she had me take my shoe off and then brought me Braden's shoe. And asked me if I could wear his shoe, and I was like, no. And she goes, well, it works for Braden right now in the season he's in. Why won't it work for you? And my mind just kept going back to that all night while I was reading this, that, yeah, the manna was good, and the manna sustained them, but once they began to walk in the promise, they no longer needed the manna, because now they're going to be able to begin to partake of what was flowing, what was the original intention. The manna ceased on the day after they had eaten of the produce of the land. The children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. That entire year, they ate of the fruit of the promise that was promised to them. So then we get into chapter 6, and this is really where 2 things. It's kind of what God had on my mind to begin with, and it's where my notes end. So, chapter 6, we know the story of Jericho, right? Jericho was a fortified city, had a wall all the way around it, just on the other side of Jordan. It's actually just, if you look at the map, it's like Jordan, Gilgal, then Jericho. So, you know me, I got a weird way of thinking. So I began to think about this. And I began to think, okay, Cody, what would you do if you was Joshua? You've eat off the fruit of the land. You're already partaken of part of the promise. Jericho sits before you. Now, if you read the scripture in chapter 6, it says that Jericho was completely shut up because they feared Israel. Nobody come in. Nobody went out. So I began to think, okay, now what would I do in that situation? And then I didn't even get to answer me because Holy Spirit answered me, and I didn't really like the answer. But he said, I know exactly what you would do, Cody. You would sit back and work around it. I mean, it's shut up and nobody's going in, nobody's coming out. It ain't hurting nobody. Just leave it there, and we'll just work around it. We got like 1 million other acres we can deal with. We'll just leave it. We'll just let that be a weight that we carry. I don't know. I wonder. You have Jericho walls. It says it's only about 7 acres. The research I did on Jericho, it's only about a 7-acre plot of land. And the overtaking of this 7 acres is one of the more popular Bible stories. Why? Why this 7 acres? I mean, when you put it in contrast with the rest of the promised land, it seems pretty insignificant. Listen to this. God tells Joshua, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And the 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him. Then Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let the 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said to the people, Proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord. So it was, when Joshua had spoken to the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord advanced and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priest who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard come after the ark, while the priest continued blowing the trumpets. So God sets this thing up in order, tells Joshua, you tell the priest with the horns to go out and begin to circle the city, and the ark of the covenant is going to follow them. What did the ark of the covenant represent? The presence. The ark of the covenant represented the Shekinah presence of Yahweh. Now, I'll just let you in on how my mind usually works. My mind would be, okay, God, if you want Jericho taken down, I'll go to another city and you take care of Jericho and I'll come back when you're done. Am I the only one that tries to get out of doing stuff? Am I the only one that prays? I want Jericho taken down. I want the walls to fall, but I don't want to have to walk around the city 7 times. See, God tells him, you lead the way. And at the movement of the priest, when the priest began to lead the way, then the presence followed. Then the presence followed. Anybody else catching when they crossed Jordan, God told them, okay, what you need to do is wait for the presence. It will go before you. You stay back so many spaces because you've never been this way before. And you follow in behind the presence. And now God's saying, I want the priest to go out and lead the way, and the presence is going to come in behind them. Does that confuse anybody else? So I really began to try to figure out, okay, God, what are you trying to say with this? Because I've read this a million times, and this has never stood out to me the way that it is right now. So what are you trying to say? And God's saying, listen, just because it happened this way one time, I cannot allow you to become dependent on it that way every time. Here's what I mean by that. So When they went to cross the Jordan, they had to wait for the presence for them to move. Presence had to go first, and then they had to fall in behind the presence. This time he's saying, I want you to go and trust me that I'm going to follow you. I want you to walk. I want you to act out of obedience. I told you to move. I want you to move, and the presence is going to come in behind you. You see, that's how we know that He is a God that goes before us, and He comes in behind us. He's at our left side, and He's at our right side. Sometimes He's going to say, you know what, you stand still and see the salvation. And sometimes He's going to say, you go after your salvation. Listen, whenever they stood or they marched around this city, the walls fell down. What did it say the men had to do? Go straight in. Whatever was in front of you, you go straight in. You fight what's in front of you. Did anybody else notice all the verbs in this? I mean, all the action words that the people had to do. It wasn't God saying, okay, your action word is you sit, and I'll do it. They had to get up, they had to move, they had to walk, they had to lead, they had to fight, they had to go straight in front of them. How many times do we have something that's standing in our way? We have a weight that we've been carrying, and I'm just waiting for it to just go away over time. It'll just, I don't know. Everybody's awful quiet. Maybe I'm preaching to myself. Maybe this is just for me. You know what word God gave me first on this over the weekend? Breakthrough. He just gave me the word breakthrough. That's all I had for a long time. And I prayed into it, and I did the thing where, I don't know, like maybe some of you other ministers can back me up on this. You get a word like that, and then you just start flipping through the Bible, and you just try to find anything that would resemble what that word is, and you're like, so maybe I can go here. And like, I wasn't finding anything. And then God led me to this, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of see that. Walls fall down, breakthrough. You go, yeah, okay, we might be able to go with this. But then, God really just began to press on me these few things about the reestablishment of covenant, the reproach of slavery finally being laid off, and you going before and allowing the presence to come in behind you. Disclaimer. That does not mean Israel could just go and do it their own way. We'll clear that up. They couldn't just go and say, well, what we're going to do is, well, God said walk around it, but we're in a hurry because, we got to get this Canaan thing done. We've been down here for 40 years. We're going to run, and then we're all going to try to climb the wall. They still had to do it God's way. They still had to be obedient to the voice of the Lord. But, man, sometimes I think God is waiting on our action. I think we're sitting praying, and God's saying, I'm waiting on your action. Your action will initiate my action. You know what that's called? Faith. Faith. Faith is you walking around the wall while the walls are still there. Faith is on day 6, you still have the energy and the motivation to get up and begin to walk around a wall that's not budged. Faith is you on time 7 getting your hand on your sword and getting ready because you know something's fixing to fall. So I told you, God, give me this word breakthrough. And man, I just want to share this. This is what I feel like God put on my heart. And it may be short, it may be different, I don't know. But I really feel like God's saying, get your hand on your sword because it's your day 7. It's your day 7. You've carried the weight for too long. You finally allowed the weight to come off. Now's your day 7. Now's your day 7. And you've been waiting, and you've been waiting, and you've been waiting for this big move from God, and God's saying, listen, I've already told you what to do. I'm waiting on you to move. When you get up and move, I will come in behind you. I will follow you. just want to read this one verse, and I'm not going to try to. Listen to this. Matthew 11:28 through 30. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come, take, find. That's the three verbs that put the ball in your court. Come to me, take my yoke, you'll find rest. Come, take, find. Listen, I don't know what your Jericho is. I don't know if you can even name your Jericho down to one thing. I can't. I got a few things that make up my Jericho. The thing that I've been skating around the edge of. The thing that I feel like God's wanting to tear down. So, I tell you what, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask the worship team, all 1/3 of our normal worship team, come back up here real quick. I know this is different. It's different for me too. Hey, Annabelle, can you come help me real quick? I'll just call you out. It's fine. We're family, right? Can you man this for me? Thank you. That's all right. So I'll tell you what. I dare you. I dare you. Take action on the word God's already given you. Go. Go. There's one thing that I can nail down, a part of my personality or characteristics that get me in trouble sometimes. It is that I'm passive. And my attitude normally is just to sit back and wait, and maybe it'll fix itself. Never worked with mowing the yard and stuff like that. You know what? It doesn't really work here either. If God looks at you and says, stand still, you better stand still. But if God's standing there saying you want your Jericho to fall, you better start marching. You better start marching. Come on, whatever you need. You know, the sound of that horn can mean many different things. The sound of that horn can either mean it's time to worship, it's time to battle, it's time to fight, or the victory's already been won. Come on.